Hello there, and welcome back to Podcast Therapy with myself, Emerald Hill, and Dr. Lori Ponsford Hill.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you again, Emerald.
Nice to see you too.
Ooh, and I see you're wearing your very fancy t-shirt that you've had made, Comedy House Party.
Yeah, actually, yesterday I got to take Comedy House on the road. We went to Woodstock, so we were located in Port Stanley. We got to go to Inwell in Woodstock, a low-cost living place. Every Thursday I bring the therapy pups. And so this was like a comedy show fundraiser to get everybody together and spread the word.
Yeah, very exciting,
Yeah.
eh? Yeah. Well, and on top of that, you were telling me how it is that you're starting your own party line to do with clothing.
I am. I've always been interested in clothing. I love fashion and everything like that, and I'm really looking into making embroidery patches and stuff like that.
Yeah, really cool, eh? So stay tuned. Things to come.
Stay tuned.
But today, here we are on our second podcast. And so we left off last time with having a conversation about interpersonal violence and what that is about.
Yeah.
And so we do actually have our own workbook, which is to do with the art of interpersonal violence recovery, to do with intimate partner abuse, harassment, and of course violence.
Right.
So if you would, if you're interested in our workbook, if you feel like either you would like to learn a lot more about that, or whether or not you feel that you're involved in a situation which you would put under the title of interpersonal violence, or if you're just really not sure what it is that you're dealing with.
Right.
Because a lot of people become very, very confused when they're in relationship. They're desperately wanting it to work, and something is going awry. They don't know what it is that's happening. And a lot of people do not want to take a look at the word abuse.
Right.
And abuse covers a lot of topics.
Yeah.
And can be very, very hard to define. And each person defines it based upon how it is that they are reacting to it, which I think is really, really important to pay attention to your gut. If something's not sitting well with you, then most probably there is something that is not attainable, not figure-outable. Well, gosh, if you could only do this or change this in this way, but things become escalated anyway. Yeah. Then there's something going awry, and this is a really great way to start to figure out what you're dealing with. Yeah, and a lot of people say that there's actually an increasing level of anger in the world. And have you noticed that at all, Emerald?
Absolutely. Yeah, just in everyday life, I think that, I drive on the road, and I see a lot of road rage. I've witnessed it a lot. And then on the other side of that, I'm also a service worker outside of therapy. I work at restaurants and stuff like that. And there's a lot of anger out there.
Definitely. And so I think it's important just to pay attention to your own self-awareness to do with what's happening inside of you. And that's just a really great starting point. So when we talk about self-awareness, we talk about not only what it is that's happening within us, but also we pay attention to what it is that's happening within another person. And then we pay attention to what's happening within us is level 1, what's happening within the other person is level 2, and what's happening within the space we call level 3. And so this is really important stuff because, number 1, a lot of people are not that self-aware.
No.
And, it does take a bit of effort and a bit of energy to be able to get in touch with yourself, to be able to figure out what is it that's actually really happening within me. Yeah. Sometimes people are way more, let's call people-pleasing, right? Where it's way more important what's happening within another person. If I can make the other person happy, then the truth is I've made everybody happy. Only the reality is eventually it's going to whip around and bite the person in the butt because they're making so many other people happy, but just not themselves.
Right.
And so that lower self-esteem makes people feel bad about themselves, right? And so to be able to get in touch with yourself, to say, what is it that's happening within me? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What is my body telling me? Which is really important to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So let's do it. Let's just get in touch with ourselves right now. So Emerald, what's going on within you?
Within me? Well, right now I'm pretty calm. I think pretty relaxed. Yeah, I was a little annoyed because yesterday I had a comedy show, the one I was telling you about, and then I went out and I had a flat tire. So this morning I had to go and get that fixed. So a little annoyed.
Oh dear, that's so funny. Well, for me, what I'm really picking up on is the fact that we are sitting under lights.
Yep.
And the room is a little bit warm because we had to turn the air conditioner off so that we don't have that background sound, right? So I can actually feel that little bit of like prickliness in my body that I'm a little warm.
Right.
And I can feel, because I'm talking and I'm talking a lot, that I'm actually not taking in deep breaths. So I'm not breathing all the way down to the bottom of my diaphragm. So I can definitely feel that. And I can feel just a little bit of tension because I'm trying to think, what are my topics, how to keep on track, just that kind of thing, right? And so just a little bit of, I would say, just a little bit of stress. Just like that.
Can I try again? Because I didn't know that was what you were.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead.
Cool. So I guess when the room is like this temperature, I get I feel like a lazy lion. I feel like I'm ready to kind of have a nap. I don't know why when it's warm like this, it just it kind of puts me out of it. So I'm feeling a little tired, I guess, and then calm. But I think I'm used to being under the lights. But
okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to level 2. Level 2 is picking up what it is that's happening in another person. And this is really, really important because if you misjudge who it is that you are working with, whether it's an individual or a couple of individuals, then there can be that really awkward disconnect.
Right.
You could be talking about whatever it is that you find is really interesting, but if you're not actually able to read body posture, then the truth is that you can miss cues that other people are giving you to say, I'm not really that interested in what you're saying, or whatever it is that might be.
Right.
You can miss the emotion. The other person is actually quite angry, but you're not picking up those cues, you're avoiding the tone or whatever that might be, right? And I'm also going to add in that there's a spectrum with everything. On the one end, avoiding or not paying attention, discounting, but on the other end, being way too sensitive, right? Spending all of your time picking up every single cue and attributing meaning to it. And here's the next part, without finding out if your guessing is correct.
Yeah.
So part of that is to guess how it is the other person is feeling, but also to find out if your guessing is correct.
Yeah. Have you ever had that happen where you're sitting with someone? There's a joke where it's I'm an empath, so I assume how other people feel. And it is interesting. Sometimes people think that they're very intuitive, and then when they actually ask, it's no, I don't feel that way at all. So very important to get that feedback. Exactly.
And it is good to remember, guess is 27% correct. Right? So, you attribute meaning, but also too, based upon transference, you're picking up cues based upon previous experiences, generally speaking, of negativity. Right? And so what we do is we start adding that information together. We actually start looking for that information in order to support our data.
Yep.
And that can be completely incorrect. And so it's really important to be able to find that out. Right? So the one thing is just to sort of, pay attention to the other person to say, right, you are relaxed. However, there is some tension that's actually happening within you because you're trying to think things through. Yeah. But also, too, the dozy feeling, right? A little bit of dozy going on as well. Yeah. I can see that, right? All right, okay. And what's your guess about what's happening within me?
I think that, there is tension. I think that you have expectations and sort of like a guide in your minds as to where you'd like this sort of conversation to go. I know that before, you were saying about how you had notes and then we couldn't find them.
And then we found them.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. It's the trouble when you write things down. Yeah. But anyway, okay. And so then, of course, we move on to level 3. And level 3 is what's happening within the space. And that's really important. There's that saying, you could cut the air with a knife. Right? So you can pick up the feeling, the energy in the space, right? That's giving you vital information as to where it is that you are actually really needing to be. Right? So you're picking up, well, where do I need to be within myself and what it is that I'm looking for, what is happening within you and what it is that you're looking for. But then the level 3 is, well, what is it that the space is actually really looking for? And when I think about that, what comes to mind is an audience, right? And so it's interesting with audiences because audiences come together and they create that energy. And I'm sure you've come across it where, that energy is either going to be accepting or it's going to be rejecting. Right? And so you're having to figure out where it is that you need to be in order to be able to match your audience.
Yeah, I was actually going to say a great example that came up in my mind was when you're on stage and you're talking to one person in the audience. And then a really great example is when you're talking about a joke, I don't know, that time that your tire went flat and then you're talking to someone who's just what's that your experience? And then they say, well, I'm actually a mechanic. And then you talk to them and you're excluding the whole audience and then there's a pause and you hear silence and then you regard it and you're they have no idea what we're talking about. This is just between you and me right now. And then that gets the biggest laugh because the audience did feel like they were being excluded and then they realize with you that you do know what's going on. They're in on the joke. It's just I don't know, a 1-2 punch kind of thing, but yeah.
Well, and I think, it is really important to know your audience, right? So you have to be able to pick up that transference, right? Transference is that we're transferring information. Anytime when it is that we're talking, we're extolling information, so we're transferring the information that we have to you, to the audience, whoever it is that might be. But also, too, transference is whatever it is that is happening within me to do my past experiences. And so those past experiences get triggered when other people say things. So, for example, when it is that you say about your flat tire, what immediately goes up into my mind is my flat tire. Right? Oh, I've had flat tires, right? That triggers my personal experiences, which could be either positive or negative, right? Depending upon whatever it is that's happened to me. And so, unbeknownst to you, the other person is actually really figuring out, based upon what you're talking about, their past experiences at the same time.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when, you as a comedian realize that you're not relatable in that moment, or there's a class difference. Like if you're talking to a crowd of like younger people that have never had to change their tires, or rich people that have never had to change their tires, it's interesting when you find yourself like you've missed the mark, and then you find out later why that is, and it's like, everyone's chauffeured around here. What are you talking
about? It's so true, right? Relatability is really, really important. You actually want people to bring up their past experiences in their mind so that they can relate to you and what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah. I think a good example is I actually got to perform at an art therapy conference, and it's funny, the juxtaposition, because there's all these like very professional, astute art therapists, and then there's the people that are interested in supporting them, but they're also the people that they would be clientele. So this woman came in and her ringtone went off, and it was Cardi B, who's a rapper, pretty explicit, and like none of these professionals listen to Cardi B. But I'm like the best of both worlds, so I got to go up and I got to say like, oh, if I had a client, it would probably be Cardi B, and then I got to do the rap. So it was like connecting these two worlds of like, people that listen to that stuff and people who have to listen to that stuff and are kind of put in that place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that disconnect that happens when you don't, in essence, know your audience, right? When the expectations are off, just that sort of thing can start to trigger people into a very, very negative place.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where it is that someone in the audience has become angry or aggressive?
Yeah, there was actually this viral video. It didn't happen to me, but it was an outside backdoor show at somebody's house, and a neighbor came in and started yelling at the audience and yelling at the comedians and like trying to take the microphone away.
Wow.
And yeah, they had to take the microphone back. But yeah, I've had a couple of times where like the audience has gotten mad, like I've misstepped, and something that happened was like I was at an open mic and there was an army guy and he was like, I'm in the army, and I was just like, oh, are you? And I thought it was funny. It was like, American or Canadian? That was the wrong thing to say. It was obviously Canadian, and he got like really mad. And there was nothing I could do to make up for it, but like sometimes it just happens.
Exactly. And I think that that's really key, right? Like you really don't know who it is that you're dealing with, and their experiences and their history and their conclusions about life.
Yeah.
And when people have a way in which it is that they look at things, and everyone has a value system and what it is that they value and don't value, when you trigger that, you can end up in a place where there is actually interpersonal violence happening.
Yeah, there's been a couple of times where I've thought that maybe that person's gonna like take me aside to like yell at me or hit me or something. Sometimes they look really angry, and it happens, I guess, more with men that feel comfortable hitting other men, because there's been a few comics, like male comics, that have gotten into fist fights and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think it's important just to be able to, know that interpersonal violence, is not actually really your fault when it is that you trigger somebody else. But the truth is, it is important to know who it is that you're dealing with, and when people are sensitive about certain things, it is important to really pay attention to that sensitivity. If you want to trigger it, then the truth is where it is that it's going to go.
Yeah.
And if you're not wanting to trigger it, it's really good to be able to, in essence, stay away from it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's impossible to do so.
Yeah.
Like, as you were saying, with road rage.
Yeah.
Right? Or that sort of thing. Because you're not in relationship with the other person in the car, other than you are driving on the same road.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's even funny when you think about tactics to make people empathize with you, like baby on board. You have no idea how many people look at that and actually say to themselves, I want to ram that car just because there's a sticker on there.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard people say that, and it's like, you know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
Have you had people say this to you?
No.
Oh, I've had people say it to me, and it's like, they're like, looking like that sticker. I want to like, what did they think they're
Wow.
better? They think that they're, yeah.
Yeah, that's intriguing. That's intriguing. Yeah, and so people do take offense to things, right? Like, and because they've had issues with things, whatever that might be. That's their past stuff, that's their transference. So it's just like, that's a very good example of that, right? So they've seen it, they've come up with a conclusion as to what it is that means to them, and then they react to that based upon that conclusion.
Right.
And whether it's to do with a perceived threat, meaning it just feels like a threat, or whether it's to do with an actual threat. I've had a bad situation with a person from a car that had that in a sticker in their window, right? Then that actually really becomes the issue. It's not that person.
Right.
And that's why I say it's not actually really like the fault of the person, but there's a trigger that's being, triggered. And so that trigger says, I need to react in a certain way based upon this. I need to be self-protective. I need to put on a suit of armor, in essence, in order to protect myself against something.
Yeah.
And then the reaction is based upon that.
Right.
So I think it's good just to really start to pay attention to your own self, what's happening within you, what's happening within the other person, what's happening within the space. And then as I say, start to react accordingly. Right? That knowledge is really important to you, because that tells you when to be in the right place with others, or in essence with the world around you. Yeah. And if that's not happening, then those experiences can escalate into either complete shutdown of relationship, or aggressive behavior, which is, either side of interpersonal violence. When you have disconnect and there is shutdown and the other person is no longer talking, they've removed themselves, they're in essence stonewalling you, is a very, very difficult place to be, because you cannot force someone to engage. Yeah. You cannot force someone to talk to you.
Right.
And so that can be a place of violence as well.
Yeah.
All the way to the other end of the spectrum, where it's, of course, obvious, right? It's either physical violence or financial violence, or violence using words, or whatever that might be. A complete place where it is that what is happening is they are trying to shut you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to add in about interpersonal violence, experiences that you have had?
There was this one experience where it was like shocking how sudden it was. I was like out with a friend who was older, and she had a son who was around my age, and we were getting along fine. And like, I guess there was this moment, because we went to the bar and it was super crowded, and there was this moment where I guess really triggered him, where we got separated. I was supposed to find the table and he was going to get us drinks.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, like, we meet up again and he just is completely shut down, and I'm like, what's going on? And like, I follow him out of the bar, and he's like, he like basically whips around and is like talking to me aggressively, and I start to like kind of walk back to the bar sort of thing, and the security guard even comes up and he's like, hey, what's going on? I was like, I don't know, this is this person's kid, they're really upset. And he's like, is that your boyfriend? I was like, no. And he was like, well, he's acting weird, basically like he's acting like he knows me kind of thing, which he didn't. So we went back to the bar and I told the mom what was going on, and then we eventually met up with him, and we were like, okay, we're gonna go back to the mom's place. So we did, and I was trying to talk to him, and the whole time he's just stonewalling me. He's just like giving me really short answers. So I'm like, okay, I'll just leave it. And then she comes back into the room and says something, and I smile, and then he just like erupts.
Wow.
And he's like, you're smirking, like he's starting to call me all these names and like yelling at me. And then he like gets up to like, I guess, come towards me to like emphasize it. And his mom slaps him back into a seat, and like says to him like, you don't do that kind of thing. And I'm really upset, so I get up to leave, and then I'm like starting to cry, and then he's just like yelling at his mom that she's the reason that I'm crying.
Whoa.
And then I say, no, obviously it's not. And then I didn't realize that when you erupt, there's like another level of like eruption, and we got to that level, and it was just like screaming and screaming, and I like got out of there. I must have walked like 100 meters, I guess, towards where my house was, and I could still hear him still yelling at his mom, and it was just like the most intense experience. That was just like malevolent, or like it, to me it was almost like a shark like lurking in the water. Yeah, it was like really intense.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And what he said was because I walked away in the middle of a conversation. That's his excuse for that whole thing.
Okay. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic story of how it is that things can escalate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's also a fantastic story about how I think when people come across a lot of violence, then I think people become more desensitized. Desensitized to it. And there's a saying, people who are traumatized traumatize others.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that are traumatized, like they have had traumatic histories, things that have happened to them. And so it's as well, we have the spectrum as well. And I find what happens, it can go either way. On the one end of the spectrum, people become highly self-protective, right? They use a lot of avoidance strategies, do not want to engage because the truth is it's not safe. On the other end of the spectrum, what people who have been traumatized have a tendency to do is they engage in unsafe behavior.
Right.
So, and I have a saying, which is stay away from weirdness. If something appears to be weird to you, then it's really good to go to the self-protective stance. Not all the way down to the end of the spectrum, but to really start to pay attention, right? Like when you are in a situation where your gut, which is your second brain, is on edge, right? Because you're not really understanding what it is that's happening. Then that's really important information, right? That's that self-awareness where you're looking within yourself and you're saying to yourself, like, how safe am I here?
Yeah.
And, just an interesting side story, right? Like, studies show that women who meander, they're not beelining, but they're meandering, have a tendency to end up being raped more than women who are beelining, because they become a target. They're not paying attention to their surroundings. They're not paying attention to the fact that they're now starting to be followed.
Yeah.
And instead of actually turning around and looking at the person, which is confronting them, what they do is they use avoidance strategies, and they're avoiding the fact that they're actually in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So the key is to really pay attention to yourself, to pay attention to what I say, your spidey senses. When they start to go off, it's important to confront whatever the situation is that's causing the fear. And, in that situation, as it is that things started to escalate, when you were in it, like what were you saying to yourself?
Basically, I was dwindling on my interaction with him. I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna like walk on the other side of his mom's to like create distance. I'm not gonna ask him questions anymore. I'm gonna like stay on the other side of the room. I'm not gonna stay. I'm not gonna drink anymore. I'm gonna get going. You know, it was just like I'm gonna take myself away further and further.
I see.
Yeah.
When you look back on the story, like, was there a certain point where now that you've gained distance from it, right, and you can see it differently, that you would have actually done things differently?
Yeah, I think like right off the hop when he started getting weird and the security guard was there, I think like right then it was like security guard has him clocked.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say to the security guard, I'm gonna go that way. If he follows me, I want you to call the cops, kind of thing. I think that would have been better, just to be like, drop everything and go.
I see. Yeah.
It's like you can always just message the person later, my friend, the mom, and be like, hey, I decided to go, instead of like making sure that everyone else is comfortable. It's like I should have just been like, I'm not comfortable. I want to go.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, right? Because if you're not reading the situation, the person that you had said had shut down, and so a lot of domestic violence happens when it is one person is actually trying to distance themselves and the other person comes after. Right? They're trying to actually gain distance because the truth is they cannot control themselves, right? But when the other person comes after them, then it opens it all up.
Yeah.
And so the key is just to be able to recognize that, you know, distance, you know, each person going to their own corner calms conflict.
Yeah.
Conflict can't happen if the two of you are not together. Right? And so a misnomer is to follow.
Yeah.
Oh, what's wrong? What's going on? Right? And then that's when it starts to escalate because they cannot gain distance, and then they try to shut the other person down, and that is an escalation and aggression because they feel that they've got to pull out everything in order to do it.
Yeah.
You're not listening to me. And so that's when it is I'm going to physically shut you down, emotionally shut you down, verbally shut you down, right? That sort of thing. So I think that, you know, it's really important to pay attention to your own history, what you've come across. Have you come across a lot of violence? And if you have, then the truth is that you might actually feel like, oh, what I need to do is I need to moderate this, mediate this, keep going with this, even when it is the signs are telling you to go in the different direction. And I think that's what's, you know, keeps a lot of interpersonal violence going. The fear, like you're saying, oh well, the mom won't know what's happened to me, or I'm in this social situation and so I'll be okay. Right? All of those kind of like statements that keep you in it are keeping you in the violence of it.
And it's interesting when you look at like the chase and the walk away, like how both can be violent and abusive in their own right. Like the person walking away, trying to get away to hold themselves in, is like the person that might explode. But it's also like when the person's chasing you and coming after you and like demanding that there's a resolution right then and like not letting you breathe kind of thing. And then it's almost like you feel like you have to turn around and blow up at them to get them to leave you alone, because like I don't know, sometimes in conflict there isn't a solution right then.
No.
Like it's almost like the difference in people that are like, we can't go to bed in an argument, and the difference between the person that's like, we gotta let it rest for a while so I can like recuperate myself so we can have a productive conversation. And it's like if those people come together, it's like it's just kind of tearing each other apart after a bit.
Yeah, I mean, different needs for different people, right? And so one person needs a resolution because they're not going to sleep. The other person needs time to think, and so, you know, they're not going to be able to think it through in order to come to a resolution. And those differences are really important, right? Because they just play out very differently for different people. But then again, you have to know your audience, right? You have to know what the other person's actually really needing in order to be able to then facilitate what they're needing to get what it is that you're wanting. So it's not all about us all of the time. I might be feeling this way, but the truth is I've got to know how it is that you're feeling in order to be able to then work with you to figure out what we need to be doing to get what we're both looking for. Which can be a lot of work.
Yeah, and something that I find really helpful is having the goal right off the hop before even having the conversation. Like the goal is to keep our tempers. The goal is to both of us be happy after this conversation, or be happy with like the resolution, right? And to not raise our voices, because I find that if it's just like we have to have this conversation, we have to get it over with, and it's just like butting heads without any direction. But if it's like we have two goals, and the first one is to keep our cool, to show respect to each other, then that's gonna draw things out, you know, because like sometimes it takes a lot of pace. Like you gotta be like, just give me a second, let me think about it. You know what I mean? Like let me have a breath or two, you know. So having time, it's almost like those SMART goals, right? Time sensitive, there's a goal in mind, you know, it's a attainable kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, speaking of comedy, the one thing that has a tendency to break tension is something funny happening. Right? Because as soon as it is that tension is broken, then there's another emotion at play. The person is now gone from wherever it is that they were to a new place, right? So it kind of lightens the mood, allows people to walk away, right? Or to redirect whatever it is that has been happening.
I think the real crux of that is timing and like how appropriate it is, because if you've ever like thought that you're gonna tell a joke and it's gonna cut the tension and make everyone laugh, and then you tell it and it makes everything worse, that's the worst thing ever. And you're just like, oh no, and now you have to deal with the repercussions of that, because it's like, you know, I don't know if you're a kid and you're talking to your parents after you've done something, and then, you know, there's that talk, and then you drop a joke about it and they're not done with it. They're like, lecture time, lecture round 2. And it's just like, no, I thought we were friends. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, a lot of the times when it is that, you know, something happens, I just remember this one time where my prof was actually talking about this subject. When people become really intense, it's really important to do something that's going to break the tension just to make everybody laugh. And just at that point, she was holding one of those paper cone cups, you know, from the dispenser. And just at that moment, the cone just started leaking. And everybody just erupted in laughter, and it was so perfect timing, just like that, right? Now everybody's looking at that, right? And it's lightened the mood. So that's a great example of that happening, right? But yeah, exactly. You've got to, in essence, know your audience. You've got to know when it is that it's important to take a break, to actually redirect yourself in a different direction. And I think, you know, other people give you those cues, and those cues are really important to pay attention to. And the worst is when people don't have good boundaries, and they're not paying attention either to themselves, they're not paying attention to the other person, they're not paying attention to what's happening in the space, and they just keep going, and they don't have any limit.
Yeah, that's happened to me, where I was actually, like, I had a relationship with someone who wouldn't stop, wouldn't listen until, like, I got, like, physically upset. And, like, I had asked them, like, why do you, like, why do you have to come at me until I get to a place where I'm in tears for you to, like, take me seriously?
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. It didn't matter why they couldn't do it. What mattered is that I had to call it. I had to be like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't not be listened to the place where I'm in physical distress.
And I think that that's, you know, a really great example of how different people have different needs. Right? So there's a misnomer, and there are actually men who have this thought process that they don't know if a woman is telling the truth until it is that they're crying.
Yeah, which is horrible.
Yeah, and so, you know, they keep pushing and pushing and pushing because they're desperate to get to the truth, because their history, their experiences have been such that they don't know what the truth is. And so when that cue happens, that tells them, oh, okay, I finally gotten to the truth. But the unfortunate part is, number one, it's abusive behavior, and number two is that it destroys self-esteem, and completely destroys that relational bond.
It creates, I think that it creates the beast that you're afraid of. Like, I think if you're afraid of that person lying to you, it creates a liar, because, like, holy Moses, like,
it's true to avoid. You start to actually lie. You're now playing into it, right? And the whole thing becomes a very, very nasty cycle. Because the person who is pushing and pushing and pushing is now getting exactly what they're so afraid of in the first place. Right? True avoidance. So, you know, I think, again, in that situation, when that's actually really happening, it's important to be able to recognize the fact that you're not going to calm that fear.
No.
Right? And that's why it's really important to be able to pay attention to the fact that you're dealing with someone who is very afraid. Very afraid of you. Right? And so a normal human behavior is, we think, okay, all we have to do is calm that anxiety. You're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, and they're actually going to be okay. Truth is, it doesn't work that way.
No.
You can answer every single question. You can cry as much as it is that you want to, right? But the truth is, the fear is actually really still there.
Yeah, and it's like a black hole, and it just keeps popping up.
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're gone for an hour or 5 minutes. It's like,
yep.
Wow.
The anxiety builds, and you're right back in the exact same place. And so all of these behaviors are not acceptable. Name calling is not acceptable. Right? Pushing people either emotionally, verbally, like literally, physically, is not okay. All of these things are really unsafe behaviors. You find yourself standing in a closet with somebody yelling at you on the other side of the closet. There's something not right here.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, it's so interesting when I read that book, and it was like yelling can be an act of violence. And it's amazing when you think about, like, it really can be like an assault, like, it's just so close in your mind and your face, like, so close to you. Oh, it's so funny when you just said that you're all of a sudden you're standing in a closet holding the door shut and they're yelling and you're like, oh my God, I'm in a zombie apocalypse. And I don't know, it's like, yeah, I remember that moment. I was sitting in my car because we were having an argument and I was like, I gotta go to work. I can't have this talk anymore. And he followed me to my car and I was sitting in my driver's seat. He just like had his head stuck in face to face with me in the driver's seat and he's like yelling at me. And I was like, this is wrong. Like, this isn't right.
It's true. It is a very important piece of information. And unfortunately, what happens is it doesn't end the relationship. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the real unfortunate part about abuse, is that people have a tendency to stay in it. Yeah. Because they really think that they can resolve it.
Yeah, when I ended that relationship, it was almost like I had to face the fear of the accountability or all of the responsibility that was the threat of it. Well, if we end this, and all of that, everything that went wrong, all of the things that I said to you, all the things that I did to you, you deserved it because now you couldn't handle it and you couldn't accept my love, kind of thing. And it was finally like, fine, I accept it. I accept all of the wrongs of this relationship. And then it was, no, of course you didn't do everything wrong. Of course it was
another
like,
tactic.
It was another tactic, and it was like, oh, it was a lie the whole time. Mm-hmm. You just gotta drop it like a brick. A big bowl, like, made of venom, just like, whoa.
That's true. It's true.
It's sticky.
Traumatized people traumatize others, and I think that is really the bottom line, right? That transference is really important because those fears get triggered, and tell me it ain't so, and so you keep into the relationship trying to actually calm that fear. Tell me it ain't so. Yeah. But the reality is that when it's not working, it's important to get help.
Yeah.
And that's really important because something is amiss. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think it's funny when you kind of come to the place where you have to cut your losses. It's just like, well, if you leave the relationship, then you've been cheating on me this whole time, but every time I ask you if you're cheating on me, then I don't believe you, and I tell all of our friends that you're cheating on me, and they think all these terrible things about you, and it's like, well, what's the point in staying, since you think I'm a cheater no matter what. All of our friends now think that I'm a bad person. I literally have nothing to lose, and you set it up that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you win, I guess.
Oh, dear. Well, I do think it's important, just to really, from our discussion and the takeaway, right? Like, you need to really pay attention to what's happening within you. Mm. And that's important. And when it is that you can do that, then you can respond based upon whatever it is that is happening within you. Next, to pay attention to what's happening within the other person. If there's a disconnect there, then it's important to be able to resolve that disconnect. Mm. Sometimes it's not resolvable because you got to remember you may be dealing with trauma. And when a person has been traumatized, they're not necessarily present with you in the room. Mm. Right? They're back in, easily triggered to a different place, a different time, a different relationship. And it could well be, because of transference, they're actually identifying you with someone else. Right? And so in that case, in that story, that could have been his mother. Mm. And so you're reminding him of his mother. And so then the question is, right, like, how is he treating his mother?
Yeah.
So, and of course, what is it that's happening within the space? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do think, like knowing your audience is important for comedy. Actually, talking about something that is going to trigger that transference creates that sense of, what is that called? Like a relatability. That sense of relatability, because then people are going, oh yeah, I remember a time when, right? And then you're getting that smile because, probably it was a comedy of errors and they have their own nightmare story to tell you. Yeah. So that's good. Well, so here we are. We've gone through, in essence, our conversation to do with, intimate partner violence recovery, and a really good workbook to work through so that you can start to pay attention to the different things that perhaps you've come across in order to need to resolve within you. And so highly recommended.
Yeah.
And so I think, if you've heard this podcast and you have your own story to tell, we'd really love to hear what it is that your stories are. Anything triggered something within you, then that's really important as well, right? To let us know what that was. And I think also too important to reach out. Emerald has different comedy events coming up and different things that she's doing, so really good to find out what those are.
August 9th and 10th is our second annual Port Stanley Comedy Festival. And so we're really looking forward to that. And I think just a couple more words on our interpersonal violence book. It's really good for kind of figuring out maybe if something has happened to you that you're not quite, you're still confused about, like what was that about? How can you label it? And also, it's really good for self-reflection because, we ourselves do things that could count as abusiveness or violence or manipulation, and we're not even aware of it. Aware of how we're kind of like self-sabotaging ourselves. So it's really good to have this book to kind of self-reflect and to sort of like pinpoint the things that are happening in your life with yourself, with somebody else, and with your surroundings and stuff like that.
For sure. Nope, that's really good to point out. Knowing yourself in very many different ways, right? The things that you do that you're actually really using to get your own way. So, do you have a joke for me?
This is a therapy puppy joke.
Oh.
Okay, so I have therapy puppies that I bring to Inwell every Thursday, and this is a joke that I did last night for them, so I hope you like it. Okay, so originally I got the therapy puppies because I thought I'd get some more exercise in, and it's true, every time they get the zoomies and a barking fit, I like to go on a walk, and it's awesome.
No.
Yeah.
No. What is that?
What?
That's not a joke.
Okay, how's this one?
Okay.
When I started bringing the dogs to Inwell, I thought that we would get, a few free treats, which is great, but started putting on a bit of weight. There, how's that one?
No.
Why? Why?
Oh my goodness me, that's so funny. Oh dear.
Well, they like this. Thanks, Inwell. You're my real fan.